Arthur's Family Truth. I was on my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. It was Scott, the guy who's been cutting my grass every Tuesday for 5 years. He's never called me before. Not once. "Mr. Stafford," he said quietly. "Is there anyone else in the house right now?" I frowned. "No, why?" There was a pause. I could hear his mower still running in the background. Then he lowered his voice. "Because I keep hearing someone crying coming from your basement." I didn't say anything. I just stood there trying to figure out how that was possible. Because my daughter had already left the house. I told him I'd check, but I didn't move right away. I just stood there in the kitchen, listening to the silence in my own house, trying to decide if what he said made any sense at all. Then I set my coffee down and walked toward the basement door. I want to be clear about something before I go further. My name is Alan Stafford. I'm 57 years old, retired civil engineer, widower. I spent 30 years reading blueprints, inspecting concrete, signing off on bridges and overpasses across 4 states. I'm not a man who panics. I'm not a man who jumps to conclusions. But when I walked down those 16 basement stairs that morning, I was not calm. At the bottom, I stopped and listened. Nothing. Just the furnace humming and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I opened the door to the jewelry studio, the space my oldest daughter Carol had turned into her workshop 4 years ago. Neat as a pin, same as always. Display cases on the walls, silver pendants under the lights, tools lined up in order. Everything looked normal, but 2 things weren't. There was a drinking glass on the work table, condensation still clinging to the outside. I touched it, cold. Recently filled. Carol had left at 7 a.m. Over an hour ago. The faucet handle on the small corner sink was damp. There was a smell too. Faint lavender soap. And then I looked at the back wall. To most people it would look like any other wall. Dove gray paint. Smooth, clean. But I spent 3 decades in construction. That wall was drywall. Not original poured concrete like the rest of the foundation. Someone had put it up after the fact. The texture was slightly too smooth. The paint slightly too fresh. I knocked on it with my knuckle. Hollow. Scott had followed me in. He was standing at the foot of the stairs, work gloves twisted in his hands. "Find anything?" he asked. "Probably nothing," I said. We both knew I was lying. 10 minutes later, Carol's Audi pulled back into the driveway. She came downstairs smiling. Easy as anything, said she forgot her portfolio, said the crying was probably a true crime podcast she'd left on a timer before bed. Scott's shoulders dropped. Made sense, right? Carol laughed a little, touched Scott's arm, apologized for the scare. Everything smooth, everything explained. I handed her the portfolio, watched her go, stood at the kitchen window until her car turned the corner. Then I went back downstairs and knocked on that wall again. Still hollow. Here's the thing you need to understand about the next part of this story. My youngest daughter Diane disappeared 6 years ago. She was 22. She'd just been accepted into a design scholarship program in Chicago. She was supposed to leave in 3 days. She went out one Tuesday night and never came back. I filed a missing persons report the next morning. Carol helped me make flyers. She cried at the dinner table. She called every one of Diane's friends, her professors, even old classmates she barely knew. For weeks, she seemed devastated. Then one night, maybe a month in, she said, "You know how Diane was, Dad? She always led with her feelings. Maybe she just got scared of the big move and needed space. She'll call when she's ready." I believed her. I wanted to believe her, so I did. My wife Sandra had passed 3 years before that in 2016. Cancer. She was 51. She left behind $120,000 from her life insurance, money she'd set aside specifically for Diane. The trust was supposed to release to Diane at 21, but Diane never got around to completing the paperwork before she vanished. After she disappeared, I kept the account open and added Carol as temporary trustee. She was responsible. She had a business. I thought it was safe. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to the house. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a soft creak from downstairs. I lay there in the dark for a long time, staring at the ceiling, and I did nothing. Because honestly, I was more afraid of being right than I was of anything else. In the morning, I made a decision. While Carol was out at a gallery event 2 days later, I went through her filing cabinet. I wasn't proud of it, but I did it. The filing cabinet in Carol's home office wasn't locked. That was the first thing I noticed. A woman who ran a business, managed client contracts, handled money, and she didn't lock her filing cabinet. Either she trusted me completely, or she never thought I'd look. I pulled open the bottom drawer and found an accordion folder labeled Household Divided Grocery in her handwriting. I spread the contents across her desk. Hundreds of receipts organized by date going back 2 years. I picked one at random, Target, March 2023, $170. 2 pages of itemized purchases: canned soup, pasta, rice, bottled water, granola bars, multivitamins. Then personal items: shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, deodorant. And at the very bottom of the list, every single time, feminine hygiene products. Size small. Carol had an IUD. I knew because she mentioned it when we reviewed her health insurance 2 years back, and Carol wore medium, not small. I pulled another receipt, same pattern, then another, then 10 more. I opened my phone's calculator. Average spend per week, around $190. Over 2 years, that's close to $20,000 in supplies, food, toiletries, personal items disappearing into this house with no explanation that held up. Carol barely ate at home. Most nights, she had client dinners. The refrigerator regularly went bad. Then I found the Amazon folder. Women's clothing, size small, ordered June 2023, a yoga mat and resistance bands. Carol had never done yoga a day in her life. Paperback novels, mysteries, and thrillers. Carol only read design magazines, sketch pads and drawing pencils. Carol worked in silver and gold, not illustration. Diane used to sketch everything: meanness, margins of textbooks, napkins at restaurants. She once told me she couldn't think without a pencil in her hand. I sat down hard in Carol's chair and stared at the receipts spread across her desk. Someone was living in this house. Someone who wore size small, read paperbacks, and drew on paper. Someone who needed vitamins and feminine products and bottled water every single week. I photographed every receipt on my phone, both hands shaking the whole time. Emotion later. Evidence first. That's something I learned early in engineering. You document what you find before you decide what it means. I heard Carol's car at 5:50 p.m. By then, I had everything back in the folder back in the drawer, and dinner on the stove. Chicken, her favorite. The kitchen smelled warm and normal. She came through the door talking about her gallery event, 3 sales, a new commission inquiry, a client who'd asked about a custom wedding set. She looked happy, relaxed. I poured her a glass of wine and let her talk. Then, casual as I could manage, "The grocery bills have gone up a lot lately. You hosting client events here at the house?" She smiled without missing a beat. "Private viewings. VIP clients expect a certain level of hospitality. Wine, good cheese, the whole thing. It pays for itself. I noticed a lot of personal items too, feminine products. Bulk buying." 1 second of quiet, then. "Cheaper that way. You know how I'm about budgets. I thought you had an IUD. 3 full seconds this time. "I do. But I keep supplies on hand for clients. You'd be surprised how often someone needs something. Good hospitality covers everything." Every answer made sense on the surface. Every answer came just a half beat too slow. I called my attorney and oldest friend Larry Hensley first thing the next morning. He told me to come in immediately. His office is on the 11th floor of a building downtown. I'd been there plenty of times after Sandra passed, when I updated my will when we originally set up Diane's trust. That morning the elevator felt like it took 10 minutes. Larry had a folder already open on the desk when I walked in. "Diane's trust," he said. "The $120,000 Sandra left?" I had our forensic accountant pull the full transaction history this week because something flagged during a routine review. He slid a spreadsheet across. Rows highlighted in yellow and red. Carol has been withdrawing money since April 2019, 1 month after Diane disappeared. I looked at the numbers, $5,000 here. 8, there, 8,000 there. Small enough not to raise immediate flags, but steady. Relentless, over 6 years, $85,000 gone. "What did she say it was for?" I asked. Larry tapped a line halfway down the page, $35,000 wired to Aldridge Construction out of Des Moines, Iowa. Listed as home renovation. He looked up. I checked. No permits pulled. No inspection records. Nothing filed at your address in over 8 years. I gripped the edge of his desk. "The rest is spread across smaller withdrawals," he said. "Some labeled operational expenses. Some labeled legal consultation fees. But there's no attorney of record." and about $28,000 paid out in installments to a personal account. Name on the account, Henry Dalton. I knew that name, vaguely. Carol had mentioned him a few times, an old business contact, someone she'd worked with years back. Larry leaned back in his chair. Alan. A construction company from out of state, no permits, $35,000 cash. I think you need to consider the possibility that something was built in that house and that Carol knows exactly where Diane is. I didn't answer him right away. I just sat there looking at the spreadsheet. $85,000, Sandra's money, left for Diane, gone. I told him everything then. Scott's phone call, the hollow wall, the cold glass, the grocery receipts, the sketch pads. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he exhaled slowly and said, "Do not confront Carol. Not yet. Give me 48 hours. I drove home and made dinner and sat across from my daughter at the table and talked about the weather. It was the longest meal of my life. Barbara Weston knocked on my front door at 8:15 the next morning. She's 72, lives next door, has for 15 years. She was Sandra's friend before she was mine, used to bring casseroles over after Sandra passed, sit with me at the kitchen table and not say much, just be there. Good woman, she looked pale when I opened the door. Shaking a little, I should have come to you years ago, she said. I was scared. I'm still scared. But I heard your lawn man on the phone Tuesday, and I can't stay quiet anymore. I let her in. She sat on the edge of the couch and pulled 3 spiral notebooks out of her canvas bag, all of them worn, covers soft from handling. She'd been watching my house from her bedroom window. Couldn't sleep most nights since her husband Robert passed, she said, and over the years she'd noticed things. She started writing them down in 2020. I opened the first notebook. Every entry dated and time-stamped in her small, careful handwriting. March 4, 2020, 1:47 a.m. Carol exited basement door carrying tray, empty dishes, returned inside quickly. Page after page. Carol going down with food, coming back up without it. Always after midnight. Always when I was asleep or away on a job consult. By 2021, the entries were 4 and 5 times a week. I heard crying once. Barbara said quietly. July 2021, faint, but it was there. Lasted about 10 minutes. She folded her hands in her lap. I called the police. Anonymous. They came. Carol showed them the studio. They said everything looked fine and left. She paused. The next morning, Carol came to my door, smiling. She said, Mrs. Weston, curiosity can be a dangerous habit in a quiet neighborhood like this. She didn't call again after that, just kept writing. Then she pulled out a USB drive. Last year I installed a small camera, she said. Pointed at your side of the yard. I know it wasn't right, but I needed to know I wasn't imagining things. 32 videos. I plugged the drive into my laptop right there. Night vision footage, grainy but clear enough. Carol at the basement door at 12:30 a.m., glancing up at my bedroom window before going in. A dark sedan pulling into my driveway at 11:50 p.m., a man carrying a large cardboard box, Carol meeting him at the door. 3 separate nights over the past year. Always late, always the same car. I didn't recognize the man, but I had a name now, Henry Dalton. Same name Larry had pulled from the trust withdrawals. I looked at Barbara, 72 years old, sitting on my couch still shaking, and she'd done more in 5 years of insomnia than I'd done in 6 years of grief. Thank you, I said. You've been braver than you know. She shook her head. I should have been braver sooner. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn message. Nancy Holloway, graphic designer, Minneapolis, Diane's college roommate. We'd spoken a few times in the first year after Diane disappeared. She called every week asking if there was news. Then the calls stopped. I hadn't heard from her in 5 years. Her message said, I've been investigating on my own for 6 months. I found something. Can we meet today? We met at a coffee shop on Hennepin Avenue an hour later. She looked older, sharper. She put an iPad on the table between us and pulled up Carol's jewelry website. These aren't Carol's designs, Mr. Stafford. They're Diane's. She showed me a silver pendant from Carol's 2022 collection, vine pattern, delicate and intricate, sold out in 3 days at $1,200 apiece. Then she swiped to a photo of a sketch Diane had done in college. Same curve, same leaf spacing, same stem wrapping around the center stone. She went through 10 comparisons side by side. Every single one matched perfectly. There's more, Nancy said. She zoomed in on the pendant image and traced her finger along the base of the vine. Look right here. At first I didn't see anything. Then I did a tiny letter D hidden in the curve of a leaf, easy to miss if you didn't know to look. Diane used to do that in college, Nancy said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. We had this thing we'd hide little marks in our work. Our way of saying, this is mine. She put a D in everything. She looked at me. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. Cost me $8,000. He didn't find her. But he pulled Carol's sales records and flagged the designs. That's when I started going back through Diane's old portfolio. 10 designs, 3 years. Every single one with the hidden D. She'd been trying to tell someone for 3 years, through the only channel she had. I told Nancy everything. The hollow wall, the grocery receipts, the $85,000, Barbara's notebooks and videos. She listened without moving. When I finished, she had tears running down her face. She's in that basement, Nancy said. Isn't she? It wasn't really a question. 2 days later, Nancy called me with the name Roger Hale, former FBI audio forensic analyst. We met at her office downtown. He'd analyzed 5 voicemails I'd received over the years. Diane's voice telling me she was okay, that she needed space, that she loved me. I'd listened to those messages dozens of times, clung to them on bad nights. Roger pulled up the waveforms on his laptop and showed me the red markers scattered through the audio, micro-pauses a fraction too long. Breathing that didn't land where a real person's breath would land. AI voice cloning, he said. Early platform called VoiceForge. I found a subscription open in Carol's email, April 2019, 1 month after Diane disappeared. She had hours of Diane's voice from family videos, enough to build a convincing clone. He played the first message again. This time I heard it, just barely a breath that came half a beat too late. A word that sounded almost right, but not quite. Not my daughter. A machine built to sound like her. Every message I'd held onto for 6 years. Every time I told myself she was okay out there somewhere. All of it was Carol, sitting in that studio, pressing send, watching me believe it. I drove home and I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time before I went inside. That night I waited until I heard Carol's bedroom door close and the light under it go dark. Then I went downstairs with a flashlight and a tape measure. I measured the basement exterior wall first, 38 feet end to end. Then I stepped inside the studio and measured again. Interior length, 23 feet. 15 feet unaccounted for. I checked the width, same story. There was a room behind that drywall, roughly 15 by 12, 180 square feet. Big enough for a bed, a desk, a life. I swept the flashlight along the left wall until it caught on something near the back corner, a tall bookshelf, 6 feet high, pressed flush against the drywall. Design books, jewelry references, a few art history texts. Looked permanent, looked like it had always been there. I crouched down and aimed the light at the base. 4 small caster wheels locked in place by metal pins, and beside the front left wheel, half hidden behind the wooden frame, a small electronic keypad. LED glowing red. I thought about what year Carol would use, not her own birthday, not Diane's. I thought about what this whole thing was built around, the night it started, the year everything changed. I typed 22019. The LED turned green. A soft click. The metal pins released and the shelf rolled forward on its wheels, smooth and silent. 1 inch, then 2. I grabbed the edge and pulled. It slid aside easily, revealing a narrow gap in the wall. Behind it, a steel door. Gray, industrial, deadbolt mounted on the outside. I stood there with my hand on the handle, and I couldn't move. My chest felt like something was sitting on it. I pressed my ear against the cold metal and held my breath. Breathing, faint, careful. The kind of breathing someone does when they're trying not to be heard. "Diane," I said. Barely a whisper. The breathing stopped. 5 seconds of silence. The longest 5 seconds of my life. Then, so quiet I thought I imagined it a voice. Thin, cracked. Like something that hadn't been used at full volume in a long time. "Dad?" I put my forehead against the door. I couldn't speak. I just stood there with my palm flat on the steel. "Dad, is that you?" "It's me," I said. "Baby, it's me. I'm here." A sound came through the door then that I will never forget as long as I live. Not crying exactly. Something that had been held in so long it didn't know how to come out all at once. "I knew you'd come," she said. I kept telling myself you'd come. I wanted to pull that door open right then. But I heard footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate, moving toward the staircase. Carol was awake. If she came down and found me here, she'd spin it. She'd call the police herself and say I'd lost my mind, that I was confused, that there was nothing behind that wall. I couldn't risk it, not when I was this close. Diane, listen to me, I said quietly. I'm calling the police right now. I'm not leaving this house. You hear me? Help is coming tonight. Okay, she said. Just that one word, but the way she said it, I dialed 9111 and told them everything. Address, situation, my daughter alive in a sealed room in my basement. The operator kept me on the line. I stood with my back against the steel door and waited. The doorbell rang before the sirens arrived. I looked through the peephole and saw Henry Dalton on the porch. Thinner than I expected, hands unsteady. He'd heard I'd been asking questions, he said. He needed to talk before the police got there. I let him in. He sat in my living room armchair and told me everything in under 10 minutes. Carol had approached him 6 years ago. He owed $28,000 in failed business debts. She offered to cover it if he helped her with one night. He said she called it a lesson, a way to scare Diane into staying. He rented a car, bought a mannequin and stage blood, put it in the road on Oakwood Avenue while Carol lured Diane out there with a fake message from a friend. When Diane stopped and got out, he played the role of an off-duty officer, took her statement, told her she'd killed a man named Patrick Grayson, that she was facing 15 to 20 years. Carol showed up and told Diane she'd handle it, said to come home and stay quiet for a few days. She told me it was one night, Henry said. That was it. One night he set a USB drive on the coffee table. 3 years of recordings on there, her voice, her messages to me, the transfers, everything. I started recording when I realized she was never going to stop. He heard the sirens getting close. He stood up, put on his jacket. I'm turning myself in tonight, he said. I know what I did. Tell Diane. He stopped, shook his head. Just get her out. Detective Donna Reeves and Officer Kevin Walsh came down with me to the basement. Carol had woken up by then, came flying down the stairs in her pajamas, demanding to know what was happening. When she saw the bookshelf rolled back and the steel door, the color left her face completely. Officer Walsh entered the code. The shelf had already been moved. The door was unlocked. Detective Reeves pulled on gloves and pushed it open. The smell hit first. Stale air and disinfectant. The smell of a space lived in but never aired. The room was small, narrow bed, thin blanket, a desk covered in paper and pencils, a portable toilet in the corner, and the walls completely covered. Drawings everywhere, layered on top of each other, trees, birds, open skies, and one face drawn over and over from memory, mine, on the bed, curled against the wall with one arm shielding her eyes from the light, was a woman. Brown hair long and tangled, skin pale, too thin. 48 kilos, the paramedic said later, but I knew her the second the light hit her face. Diane, I said. She lowered her arms slowly. Her eyes found mine across the room. And then I was across the room and on my knees beside the bed, and I had my arms around her, and she felt like she weighed nothing. You came, she whispered. I came. Did you ever stop looking? I closed my eyes. The true answer was yes. There were years I'd stopped. Years I'd let the silence become an answer. Never, I told her. Not once. She held on tighter and I didn't let go. Behind us, I heard Officer Walsh put the cuffs on Carol. I didn't turn around. On the back of the steel door, scratched into the metal with a bent nail, were 6 words, Dad, find me. I am here. She'd carved it in year 2. She told me later. When she started to doubt, I was still looking. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury came back in under 4 hours. Carol was sentenced to 18 years. Eligible for parole after 10, Henry Dalton pled guilty separately and cooperated fully. Brian Aldridge, the contractor from Iowa who built the room, testified that he knew by the end of the job it wasn't a wine cellar. He took an accessory charge. A man named Ned, homeless, in 2019, sober 3 months now, walked into the station the week after the arrest and said he'd watched the whole staged accident from a broken warehouse window. Watched them set up the mannequin. Watched Diane stop the car. Never came forward because he didn't think anyone would believe him. Now they did. Diane was 28 years old when she walked out of that hospital. It took months to get her legs back under her, longer to get everything else. 8 months later, she published a memoir. She called it The Hidden Room. At her book launch, standing at a podium in front of 200 people, she said, I survived because I kept drawing my father's face on the wall, because as long as I could remember what he looked like, I knew I was still loved. And as long as I knew that, I wasn't going to give up. She opened a nonprofit after that. Hope's Wings Art Therapy, free creative workshops for trauma survivors. It's still running. We don't live on Ashford Lane anymore. We sold the house. Neither of us could do it. Our apartment now has floor-to-ceiling windows. Diane picked it out. I need to see the sky, she said. Every single day. Some nights I stand at those windows and think about all the mornings I walked down those 16 stairs and never knocked on that wall hard enough. Never asked the question that needed asking. I trusted the wrong person. I trusted comfort over truth. And my daughter spent 6 years in a room the size of a parking space paying for it. Scott Briggs made a phone call on a Tuesday morning that he almost didn't make. He told me later he almost put his phone back in his pocket, figured it wasn't his business. I'm glad he didn't. Don't wait for someone else to make the call. Don't explain away what your gut is already telling you. And if something feels hollow when you knock again. Trust is not the same as loyalty. Real loyalty means asking the hard question even when you're terrified of the answer. If you made it this far, thank you. That means something to me. Leave a comment below, tell me where you're watching from, or tell me what part of this story stayed with you. And if it moved you, share it with someone you trust. Not because I need the numbers, because some stories are worth passing on. Subscribe if you want more. I'll be here,